Well, hello there, and welcome back to the Fabulous Folklore Presents series with me, your host, Icy Sedgwick. Yes, this segment does finally have a title because we have obviously had 3 interviews now. This is number 4, and I have many more planned, so I kind of felt like it needed a name. Today, we're very lucky to have Brandi, the brains behind Venus and Retro Tarot, here to talk about all things tarot, astrology, and making modern spirituality more inclusive. I've known Brandy online for a couple of years now and she's absolutely fabulous. So I really enjoyed this interview and I'm pretty sure you will as well. Let's take it away. Hello, Brandy, and welcome to Fabulous Folklore.
Thank you for having me, Icy. I'm so glad to be here.
I think we'll just jump straight into it because obviously we are on Zoom.
Oh, love it.
So obviously, I first met you on Instagram because you were posting a lot of tarot content, but then you also sort of started doing a lot of astrology stuff as well, which is what I think you post on your YouTube channel, isn't it?
Yes, a lot of mixing and blending the two, tarot and astrology.
How would you describe tarot and astrology sort of to people who aren't familiar or who maybe just know them from like the cutesy memes and the stereotypes?
I've actually had a lot of practice with this. And for me, especially, I have a lot of skeptics in my family. So I kind of try to break it down. And usually, I come from the South in the United States. So there's a lot of religious superstition around these things. So I try to relate it more to psychology, and I'm really interested in psychology. So I usually tell them that they're tools um, to use as a way to better get to know yourself, as well as understand the people around you, understand world dynamics, and really they can be used as practically or spiritually as you want them to be. Uh, there are no rules, right? But as far as tarot, it's not a tool of the devil, and astrology is more than your sun sign. Astrology is a map of the stars that gives you insight into the cycles of the universe, and basically it's a blueprint of the story of us and how we came to be. And I think it's really interesting the ways that you can look back at times in history and look and say, oh, wow, Pluto was here. Just like here in the US, we're going through our Pluto return. And, the same themes that are coming up around how America was formed on issues around, bodily autonomy, slavery, class systems, all of these things, how they're coming up again, you know. So when you talk to people who don't understand and you kind of put these pieces together, it makes it more real for them. Like it doesn't feel like it's just like made up, there is some science to it. So and then tarot, I kind of explain it as these 78 cards make up the collective experience of, each of us. So there's not one card that is foreign to any person that's lived on this earth. And putting these archetypes together and blending them, we can really look into ourselves, and it's a mirror into our psyche. And there's just so many ways that I kind of try to approach it to open people's minds, because it's so interesting to me.
Yeah, I think I like to think of that about tarot, that almost like psychological prompts for things to
Mhm.
think about, like a different perspective. So sometimes, when you overthink a problem, you
Mhm.
really overthink it and it ends up being completely useless what you come up with. But with tarot, you can look at it and go, oh, I hadn't thought of it that way. So it's interesting that you
Exactly.
mentioned psychology there.
Yeah, and even like in my practice, like I'm in therapy, and I will shout loud and proud about that. I'm a big believer in using therapy as a healing tool, and I bring my tarot cards to therapy. And sometimes when my therapist will ask me questions, or even between sessions, if I'm thinking of a certain situation in my life, I can either, spread out the deck and just look at the cards and say, what card, evokes or reminds me of this experience, or, I can shuffle and let a card come out and kind of see how it relates, what the feeling is, or the atmosphere, or any imagery. Like, it's very interesting how it unlocks some things that, we may not necessarily, make those connections. And it's a really interesting tool. Just kind of like, in the past with Rorschach tests, like, what do you see in this, and how does it relate to your experience? It's very interesting how we all connect to the cards differently. And, lately with the sharing of so many tarot readers on social media, how, so many different definitions have come out of cards that, like, I would never have thought of that, but that's so beautiful, and each of us add to that. So
Yeah.
yeah, I
I
love
was going
that.
to say, actually, what do you think is behind the sort of the ongoing popularity boom of tarot? Because I mean, I've seen it sort of in quite, well, how do I put it? Like mainstream magazines doing whole articles on tarot, and it's like, whoa, where did that come from?
Yeah, I think it's really interesting, like how that's come about in the last few years. I know the pandemic has really, blown it up, especially during lockdown when everyone was at home and connecting during social media. It really blew up on social media. But even before that, um, being on YouTube and seeing those pick a card readings, and I really just think the advent of the internet and the ways that, so-called closed practices, or, that sense of gatekeeping, where it was like, if you didn't have someone to initiate you into these practices, you may not have known about them. More people are exposed to them. And I think in a way that's really beautiful. In other ways, it kind of sucks because capitalism comes in and takes over. Like, recently, I just saw where for this Mercury retrograde, McDonald's is offering tarot readings. And I was just like so disgusted and perplexed, because it really is a bastardization of, the practice, to me anyway, because, it makes it so corporate. But, the overall widespread access, I think, is a really wonderful thing. And the internet, I think, is responsible for that.
Mm. I'm just the mental image of like combining McDonald's, tarot, and Mercury retrograde. It's like, what could go wrong?
Right? Exactly. Like, half the time, they can't not overcook the chicken nuggets that I give to my kids. I'm like, I feel bad even serving this to you. I'm sorry. Now let's get a tarot reading with that.
Yeah, imagine that in the drive-through though, the queues. Oh, that would be bad.
Oh my goodness.
Oh god. So what was it that you would sort of say first brought you to tarot and astrology, or tarot or astrology? Which one sort of came first?
Actually, neither one of those came first. When I was really young, I had a lot of psychic and paranormal experiences. And I'll try to make a long story short, but I had an aunt who lived with my family who died when I was about 3 years old, and she passed away in our home. Um, and I only had one real, like, imprint of a memory of her, but I could always feel certain, energies around me. And we had this mug, Christmas mug, in our house. And it was like, if you picked it up, it sung Christmas carols. And when you put it down, it stopped. So when I was home, sometimes, like, this was years after she died, I must have been like 6 or 7 years old. It would start singing in the cabinet when I was home by myself. And I thought it was broken at first, until I realized this was only happening when I was home alone. So I got really scared. And, I didn't like these feelings of these presences around me anymore. So I think what happens to a lot of children that have these things is they shut it off. But I was still always curious. Like my mom is a hairdresser. So being in my mom's salon, I would always be looking at the sun sign horoscopes in magazines. And, that's as far as I knew about astrology, but I was always curious about it. And I guess like tarot cards kind of scared me because of the experiences I had. I played around with a Ouija board, when I was friends, in middle school. And around my Saturn return, I started having those psychic experiences again. I would be looking for things and I would hear like in really loudly in my ear, like check here. And it would be exactly what I was looking for, was where it was, or like an image and exactly where it was. And I just started noticing these things happen and felt skeptical. And I would say it was after the birth of my son, my second child. And this goes along with astrology. I have Saturn and my South Node and Pluto in the 5th house of children and childbirth. I had a really traumatic birth and I almost died in childbirth with him. And I think a lot of the experiences I had reawakened a lot of these things. And it was like I just started exploring again, and it really opened that door. So I just started, looking up my birth chart and all these things that it's really interesting. And it just kind of brought me back to myself. It helped me at a time where I was feeling really lost and needed healing around, what happened to me.
I'm so sorry you had such a traumatic experience. I mean, and I'm
Oh,
glad
thank
that you're
you.
here to that sounds weird, you're here to tell us about it, but I'm glad that you're still here.
Yeah, thank you.
Well,
I mean, it's a big part of my journey, what brought me here. So, yeah.
so do you still have sort of experiences of sort of either external presences or sort of like inklings and knowings of things? Do you still have that kind of stuff now?
I do. I'm trying to work on making the connection stronger because I know that what happens is sometimes I'll get really excited and then I get afraid. And I know that my guides and my ancestors, they don't want to scare me. So they'll back off a little bit. But I have I use my pendulum, for yes, no questions. And I try to do some basic protection rituals and things, but it definitely around Pisces season, because that's, when we're all the most psychic, I can definitely feel certain times of the year where, the veil is thin and that connection really comes through. And then there are other times where it's like, where are you guys? But I know that's part of me, being neurodivergent and needing to be more consistent in my practice so that I can build that connection. It's so hard.
Do you find that tarot or astrology, or perhaps both of them, do they help you sort of navigate neurodivergence in a way, or do they kind of become more like a way of building sort of consistency?
I think they do both. They help me navigate, especially when I'm really activated. I know in the beginning, when I was learning about reading tarot, I would see a lot of advice about don't come to your deck when you're really activated or really messy. And I was really glad that I took this tarot course called Tarot for the Wild Soul by Lindsay Mack. And she was like, you can come to your deck any way that you are, and pull cards. And sometimes I would just have questions, why is this happening to me? Why do I have this diagnosis? Because it's nice to know and be able to name, what this thing is. But at the same time, sometimes you're angry at the universe. Like, why, do I have these extra hurdles? And, I would find that card that would give me comfort. Like if I pulled 4 of Swords, it was just like, give your mind a rest. What is, what I would, the message I would pull from it. Or I'm sorry, what was the other half of the question? That's where I get lost.
No, it was just about whether you you sort of find it helps with any kinds of ways of building consistency when you're sort of working on anything.
Oh, yes, definitely. And then also, building that practice, because routine is very good for me. So, trying to build a practice of pulling a card every day, or, around the full moon and the new moon. And, even if I don't make a whole journal entry, just kind of marking down, where was I today? What was I feeling? And what do I think this means? And, it kind of gives some structure to and meaning to life, where sometimes it felt like, I was untethered, and I think that it can do a lot of that for, even neurotypical people, just, every day. It's a wonderful tool.
Mm. Do you find that certain cards seem to follow you around? Like you'll get like a certain card loads for like a short period of time, and then it's something completely different, and then it's in like every spread.
Oh, yes. And lately for me, in the upright and in the reverse, it's been Eight of Wands. And I know it's because like I've really been trying to focus on my goals of building my YouTube channel, like trying to get a plan like for Instagram, because the algorithm is like so chaotic and it's not built for um, most people, but neurodivergent people especially. You know, they want you to post every day and do reels and, do backflips and cartwheels. It really there's a sense of scattering your energy, and that's very Eight of Wands in reverse. But that Eight of Wands upright is like, you want to hit your mark, you want to, fast communication and make sure that you're getting your message out there. So that card has really been following me, and I think it's been telling me like you can meet your goal. And it's also ruled, if we're talking about the astrology of cards, Mercury and Sagittarius. And Sagittarius is that, that higher perspective and really spreading a message. So, Mercury is the messenger. So I really think about that as like encouragement to keep going, even when things get tough. So
I like that. Yeah. And I'm quite a fan of Sagittarius because I've got like 3 placements there.
mhm.
Um and so I'm quite fond of it, because you do get attached to certain signs, don't you? Like you end up with one that you're
Oh,
like,
yeah.
oh, I really like that sign.
Yes. My husband's a Sagittarius, and I have definitely learned a lot about that archetype by being married to a Sag.
Do
They're
you find do you find that
even
you attract certain types of signs then?
Yes, I attract a lot of Scorpios, and I've had a lot of friends that are Scorpios. And I think that bond of, by traditional rulership in astrology, we're both ruled by Mars. And I think that intensity, it just really is something that we connect on that level. And then another sign that I really meet a lot is, I would have to say Capricorn, because that's my 7th house of other, partnerships. So I meet a lot of Capricorns, and I feel like, it's like you just get me, and I get you. I love being in the presence of Capricorns and Aquarius. I love I love the Aquarius archetype because at its highest form, they really do want to transform the world and, leave it better than how it is, and I connect with that on such a deep level of doing activism. And that's where my Jupiter is placed, of really wanting to see the world, expand into the future, and make it more equal for everyone. So
Mm. Yeah.
yeah.
So I think that's one of the things that I remember when I first sort of came across you on Instagram. I was like, oh wow, this is really cool. Sort of seeing the way you blend tarot in particular with like a sense of activism. and so on. And I know obviously, like you were saying before, about people mentioning like the Pluto return of sort of the US state and everything. So I think, do you think that we can use these sort of divinatory systems for sort of social justice purposes in a positive way?
Oh, absolutely. And I see many people on Instagram that do it way better than I do. I wish I knew more. I feel like I'm getting better at the social activism part. Uh, my kind of niche, I think, is the diversity, inclusion, and more like disability inclusivity. Because I am a person who has lived with disabilities for a long time. And um, a lot of what I saw when I started watching tarot readings on YouTube felt very um, uninclusive of people who had mental illness, who struggled, with depression, or, I would hear the term energy vampire, or, that, you're just not trying hard enough, or, you can't manifest because you're in a low vibe. And those things felt very unwelcoming. And without really knowing a lot about the Instagram tarot community, I was just like, I want to make something for, the tarot community that I would have wanted, when I started reading and looking at this content, because some of it did make me feel unwelcome, whether it was intentional or not. That there really needed to be some conversations to be had around, how we can be more inclusive in our language and make more people feel like, there's hope for you, that you're not a bad person because you struggle, that you're not a burden on other people and they shouldn't have to distance themselves from you. Like, obviously, there are toxic relationships that do require that, but I felt like it was going beyond that. In the tarot and even sometimes in the astrology space, with stereotyping and certain things like that. So some of it's all good fun, but
So I think that's one of the things with when you look at the difference between sort of like modern astrology and sort of the more like traditional astrology. Because I know I had a Maya Rourke on late last year talking about the traditional astrology, and that one seems a lot broader in what the signs actually mean, whereas a lot of the modern stuff can be like, oh, you're a Scorpio, so you're this. So do you find that it's that side of it that can be a bit reductive?
I feel like on both sides there can be a little bit of that. Like, sometimes Scorpio gets reduced to like sex and that's it. And there's so much more to it than that. And then sometimes in more traditional astrology, the predictive bit of it, I feel like it doesn't allow as much for free will, even though, I mean, there are different camps. Obviously, I'm taking a Hellenistic astrology course where they talk about, free will in the prediction of astrology and someone's life path. But some of it does feel like, oh, well, you have this planet in this house and it's, co-present with, let's say, Saturn. So it's going to play out this way, whether no matter what you do. And sometimes I feel like that to me is kind of rubber stamping someone. And, I know that's where the tradition comes from. It's ancient, it's from a long time ago, but that's why I like to kind of blend and use more of an intuitive practice, which I know probably, astrologers would be screaming at me if I like ever showed the way I read a chart, because I usually just pick what pops out at me. But yeah, like I don't like any kind of dogma where it feels like, oh, you have to do it this way or that way, or, we don't allow for the fullness of someone and their experience, to for them to speak for themselves rather than their chart, stamping them as you are this, so if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I suppose also just even like the context. So if you've got sort of someone in, I don't know, like 4th century Greece versus like say 21st century Australia, going to be very different contexts and
Right.
different things going on.
Right, because they didn't have the internet. They didn't, have indoor plumbing. I mean, I could be wrong about that. There were some things that kind of went away and came back, but things were so different, things that they couldn't conceptualize, that exist today. We've had to kind of create new frameworks in order to interpret some of these astrological aspects and transits and certain things, and make them more queer inclusive, and just inclusive of more identities as they're able to, as they're more accepted in society. So I think that's really important, to keep pushing the ball forward.
Yeah. So in terms of tarot, obviously one of the things that you're really generous with on your account is sort of sharing tarot spreads that people can try. What I wanted to know is, how do you actually come up with a tarot spread?
Oh my gosh, sometimes it's just like divine, like download. One, like the last one that I did, that what the fuck spread, it literally came to me while I was sitting on the couch watching TV with my husband, and I saw a question mark, like, and I just got a piece of paper and started like sketching the outline of it, and the questions started coming. I was like, I have to write this down, because if I don't, I'm gonna lose it. But sometimes it happens like that. Other times I can look at a major arcana card and kind of think of the themes that come up and some of the questions that I would ask, and that will inform a certain spread for me. Yeah, there's just different ways. And then sometimes astrology too. And if there are current events going on, that could inspire a certain spread, like, oh, well, this is happening in the world. So I can generalize it, to make it fit where, anyone could read from it. But this is a theme that's coming up that I think people could benefit from, using the spread. So.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Are you still doing the spreads deck?
Yes, I am still working on the spreads deck. I had to kind of hit pause on it because a few of the manufacturers that I was working with, they're overseas in China, and they had to lock down because of the spread of COVID. So I'm really glad that they were doing what they need to do to stay safe, and they have been keeping in contact with me. But I kind of, in that time, I was like, well, I think there are some changes that I want to make. So, I mean, it was kind of a blessing in disguise. I mean, not that COVID was getting worse, but that I kind of wanted to go back to the drawing board and retool some of the questions. And, I was possibly thinking about making an expansion pack, where I could do like 2 possible on Kickstarter, like make a core deck and then an expansion for like different tiers. And I designed some like kind of like an 8-ball dice, like a yes, no, maybe, phone a friend, for different levels. And I just thought, this will give me time to kind of plan it out and make it really fun, and kind of write a spread book too to go along with it, so that if people want to just lay out the cards and have some spreads to work with within the cards, that they can have that as well. So it's a process, and I feel like it's kind of like having that Mercury retrograde too, like going over and over your creations. But I will be so happy when it's finally done and printed, and I can launch it on Kickstarter.
Because that was going to be my next question, actually, because obviously the idea of having sort of a way of either following spreads or being able to just kind of pull cards and make your own spread. Because I'm dreadful at remembering what goes where. I really am.
Yeah.
So I'll lay everything out and go, oh my God, what were they for again? So the
Right.
idea of sort of having like prompts there is really quite sort of helpful, I think, to me. So I was going to ask, is it on Kickstarter yet? But obviously, because I'm clearly going to support that because it's an
Oh,
awesome
thank
project.
you.
I remember when you announced it on Instagram, and I'm like, yay, that's going to be
Yes,
great.
yes, I was so happy to get the prototype. When I printed it, I sent it off to a printer, and I was like, oh, it'll be cool to get the holographic cards. And it was really different than what I expected because like it's so easy to scratch it off. Like the paint comes off. So I was like, oh no, if I put these on Kickstarter, nobody's gonna want to buy it. So like I'm gonna have to get a prototype reprinted. So I was like, perfect time to go kind of back to the starting board, and that's going to be kind of a summer project for me, and hopefully the fall will be a good launching time, hopefully when Mercury is no longer retrograde. And i'll I'll have to look at some astrology to look at the most optimal time to relaunch that, but it's definitely going to be sometime before the end of the year, because I know people have asked me about it and are excited for it, and I'm so glad they're excited for it. So
Well, it's just such a cool idea because obviously when you look on Kickstarter or Etsy even, at all the cards that are available, they're all like regular decks.
mhm.
And I remember when you mentioned it, I was like, that's such a cool idea. Like, and because it's so different and so unusual. And I think that's the kind of thing where if you do like being a little bit more freestyle with your spreads, it'll help
Mhm.
with that. But if you also like having structure, it'll help with that as well.
Yeah,
And it's just always nice to support independent creators because it's like, do the big publishers really need more money?
they really don't.
So obviously the big question that I've saved to the end because I think anyone who does read tarot will know the answer to this for themselves. But do you have a favorite card?
Absolutely. The Queen of Wands is my favorite card. Like when it shows up, I know that it represents me. It's a card that Aries rules. So I love that the message of the Queen of Wands is like, be bold, be unapologetically yourself, you know, take risks. And, she's just does what she wants. She's witchy, she believes in her magic. And, if I'm ever pulling that card and I'm not in that mode, I just feel like it's a reminder like that you are magic, and that you can really embody that anytime that you need to. You can just channel it, or fake it till you make it, because she's a badass. So that card just always makes me smile. I pulled it yesterday and I was like, I needed this today.
Oh, that's so cool. I know like one of the decks I've got, she's not just sitting in a throne, she's sort of sitting in the curled up tail of a dragon. And it's like, could you get any cooler?
I know, right? And she usually has a black cat in the card, and I have two black cats, and they are just like the loves of my life. So I'm like, I am the Queen of Wands. I can do that.
Oh, that is so cool. I suppose that as well comes back to what we were saying earlier about like the empowering nature of tarot, that you can sort
Mhm.
of very much see yourself in the cards.
Absolutely.
But I actually really like temperance as well. Um, and that sort of sense of balancing things because I've
Mhm.
got such a horrible tendency of just doing the thing and not stopping to think about whether it's a good idea or not. And I think temperance
Yeah.
becomes a bit like, have you weighed that up yet? No.
That's why I used to hate that card. I have really had to develop a better relationship with it, because it's all about patience and divine timing, and just waiting. And as an Aries, I don't want to wait. I'm like, I want it now. I'm like all cardinal. I'm a Cancer rising, Capricorn moon, Aries sun, and like we love to initiate, start, and control. And temperance is like, but can you let go and trust spirit? And I'm like, can I mean, I know the card says you can, but I don't think I have the fortitude to do that right now, but it's really taught me some important lessons.
Yeah, I think the strength card is that one for me, that it's like you can get things done through being like gentle and compassionate, and I'm like, oh, I'll just power through.
Lots of big lessons in there. Yeah.
So if people want to come and find you online, where are the best places for them to find you?
They can find me on my YouTube channel, which is Venus and Retro Tarot. They can find me on Instagram at Venus and Retro Tarot as well. And my website is currently under construction, but it's venusandretrotarot.com. So trying to keep it all the same and nice and neat. But I will be posting my link tree back up in my my Instagram so that all my links will be there. So yeah, I will be in every corner of the internet that you can find me.
I'll obviously put links in the show notes for YouTube and Instagram, because obviously those ones are sort of all good, and then I'll update the other one once you've got the other one up as well. So that's the joy of the edit button, which we still don't have on Twitter, but never mind. Well, thank you very much. It's been so lovely finally getting to actually talk to you like face to face.
Yes, this has been wonderful. Oh, thank you so much for having me, and have a wonderful day.
No problem. Well, thanks for listening, and I hope you enjoyed that episode. If you did, feel free to leave a review wherever you listen to podcasts, because that helps other people find the show too. It also takes between 4 and 6 hours to research, write, record and edit these episodes, so if you want to help support my time in doing that, then you can buy me a coffee, or you can join the Fabulous Folklore family on Patreon and enjoy extra benefits, including exclusive episodes and articles and even illustrated talks. All the links you need are below, and thanks in advance.